You see it all the time. Brilliant startups, great ideas, and then they just fail. Why is that? Is it the money, the team, maybe just bad luck with timing? Well, it turns out the real reason is often something much more basic, and it's hiding in plain sight.
I mean, people have studied this a ton, and it keeps coming back to one single critical mistake, over and over again. They build something that nobody actually wants. So it's not about how well you build it, it's about what you're building in the first place.
And you know what? It almost always starts right here, in this tangled mess of ideas, assumptions, and what people think the problem is. This is that classic trap where founders fall head over heels for their solution before they even really truly understand the problem. But here's the thing. What if there was a way to cut right through that knot?
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. First, we'll dig a little deeper into that startup graveyard. Then, we're going to uncover this really cool, locally forged solution. We'll break down something called the Yagba framework, see what gives it an edge, talk about how you can actually use it, and finally, help you find your own foundational truth.
All right, so this solution we're talking about, it actually comes from Sierra Leone. It's a framework built by Francis Stevens George from Innovation SL, and it was designed specifically to help entrepreneurs get this foundational stuff right from the start.
So, the framework is called Yagba, and the name itself is actually a huge part of why it works so well. See, Yagba is a word from Creole, and it means a hassle, a real headache, a problem that causes genuine, significant pain. Just by using that word, it immediately focuses your mind on solving something that people are truly frustrated with.
Okay, so how does this thing actually work? Well, Yagba is actually an acronym. It stands for 5 steps that you follow in order, and they take you from having this kind of vague idea to a super clear, actionable problem. So, let's break it down.
All right, first up is why, and that stands for your context. Look, before you even think about a solution, you have to get inside the world of the person who has the problem. It's all about empathy, right from the get-go.
And if you look at the canvas for this, it actually forces you to start right here. This your context block, it's the starting line. You literally can't skip it and jump ahead to your awesome solution. You have to start here. So, this first step is all about mapping out the terrain. You've got to ask the big questions, like who actually has this Yagba? Where and when does it pop up? And is this a tiny little niche issue, or is it something that's super widespread? The key thing is, you have to start with their reality, not your brilliant idea.
Okay, once you have the context, we move on to A for actual pain. And this is where you really start digging. You're going past the surface level stuff to find out what the real headache is.
So now, the focus shifts right onto this actual pain section. This is all about getting past what people say is wrong and understanding the deep down frustration, the real inefficiency at the heart of it all.
What you're trying to do here is really understand the texture of that pain. Is it something that needs to be solved right now? Does it happen all the time? Is it costing them a lot of money? And maybe the most important part, you have to just listen. How do people talk about this problem in their own words? What language do they use?
All right, next up is G, and this stands for gap and gravity. Now, this part is one of the most powerful and honestly unique things about the Yagba framework. It's not just about how big the problem is, it's about how severe the consequences are if you don't solve it.
So the idea here is to figure out the distance between how things are now and how people wish they were. But you're not just pointing out that there's a gap. You're trying to measure what happens because that gap exists.
This really forces you to ask that critical question. So what? What happens if we do nothing at all? What are the real-world consequences? This is what tells you how high the stakes are and gives you a sense of just how motivated someone is to pay for a solution.
Okay, so now we make a pivot. We move to B for business relevance. At this point, you've found a real, painful problem with serious consequences. Awesome. But now for the million-dollar question, can you actually build a business around solving it?
And that's what this part of the canvas is for. It's the reality check. It forces you to take a hard, honest look at whether this can actually make money.
Because look, having a great solution doesn't mean you have a business. Not until you can answer these questions anyway. Who is going to open their wallet for this? How many of those people are there? And what are the other options out there, and why aren't they good enough?
And that brings us to the final and I'd say most critical step, the second A, which stands for alignment and advantage. This is where you stop looking out at the customer and the market, and you start looking inward at your own team.
Yeah, this last section is all about looking in the mirror. It's asking, what's our unique ability to get this done? What's our special fingerprint on this? And also, is the timing right for this to take off?
This is where you have to answer the two most important questions any founder can ask themselves. Why us and why now? What do you bring to the table that no one else does? What's your secret weapon, your unique insight? How does this whole thing fit with what you're actually good at and what you want to achieve?
Okay, so we've walked through all 5 steps, but what really makes this framework different? What gives it that strategic edge? Why does it work so well?
A huge part of it, a real game changer, is that gap and gravity idea. So think about it like this. On one side, you have a big problem that people can just live with. Like maybe not everyone has a smartphone. That's a high gap, low gravity problem. It's really hard to build a business on that. But on the other side, you could have a more focused problem, but with huge consequences. Think about a lack of clean water. That's a small gap, high gravity problem. The consequences are severe, and that creates urgency. It creates a willingness to pay. It makes for a much stronger business. So really, gravity is the true measure of how much a problem is worth solving.
And the best part, putting this into practice is actually really simple, and it's designed to be a team sport. Just print out the one-page canvas, get your team together with a bunch of sticky notes, and start working through it. But remember, this isn't a one-and-done thing. Think of it as a living document. You should be coming back to it and updating it as you learn more.
Okay, so after all of that, what's the big takeaway here? If you remember just one thing, what should it be?
Well, it really all boils down to this one powerful idea. The Yagba framework isn't just a checklist. It's a tool for replacing your assumptions with actual evidence. It helps you channel your passion into real purpose. It makes sure you're not just chasing some cool idea, but that you're building your whole company on a solid foundation of truth.
And that leaves us with one last, pretty challenging question for all you innovators and entrepreneurs listening. I want you to take a really hard look at what you're working on and honestly ask yourself, what is the real Yagba that you are meant to solve?